this felt like punishment for builders that were doing it the right way, because I saw all of the costs that were adding up that I was about to have to pass on to my customer. It didn't feel good. Okay. It felt like I have to submit plans, which cost money. I have to get a blower door test done now, which costs money. I had to increase your R value by an R4 in your roof.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and in today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tracy Manchego-Baker, co-founder of Tiny Building Experts based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Tracy and her husband, Austin, have built a reputation as experienced, ethical, and high-quality tiny home builders, with Austin leading the way by being a part of almost 500 tiny house builds since 2014. They also serve as industry consultants and subject matter experts, supporting tiny home initiatives both locally and nationally for building codes, standards, and navigating the placement of tiny homes legally. And if you've heard the recent news out of Colorado regarding new tiny house regulations, you'll be happy to know that Tracy served on the committee to help create them, and she'll walk us through exactly what the new law does and doesn't do. Stay tuned to discover more insights from Tracy Manchego-Baker of Tiny Building Experts. All right, I am here with Tracy Manchego-Baker. Austin Baker and Tracy Manchego-Baker from Tiny Building Experts are based in Colorado Springs, Colorado. They are an experienced, ethical, and high-quality tiny home builder, with Austin leading the way by being part of almost 500 tiny house builds since 2014. They also serve as industry consultants and subject matter experts supporting tiny home initiatives both locally and across the country for building codes and standards, plus navigating the placement of tiny homes legally. They participated in the Colorado TAC team for HB 22-1242 and continue to stay involved with the state of Colorado regarding new tiny house laws. Tracy Manchego-Baker, welcome to the show.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, thanks for being here. So I want to just start, can you give me your backstory? What got you into the tiny house world?
I'm going to blame Austin. He is the one that kind of drew me in. I saw his passion and his love for the tiny houses. He was working a white collar kind of director of admissions job at a college.
Okay.
And one day he came home and he was like, "Hey, listen, I'm going to go do some work with my hands." And I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And I saw him just start this journey, Ethan, that was really interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard those stories where people say, "Hey, everything that I've done to this point, I feel like it was all on purpose to get me to where I am"? I kind of look at that with Austin's story. I watched him do fencing to siding on 3-story apartment buildings to installing over 10,000 windows and doors over a few years.
Wow.
I watched him do these different roles. And one day he came in and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go down here and apply at this place down the street. It's just close to home. And they're doing some, chicken coops and sheds. And it's a bunch of cool Amish guys." And that's really what he said to me. And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, it's a company by the name, I think they were Shed Yard at that time. And he went down there and he walked in, and mind you, when Austin was a director of admissions at the college, he saw that news magazine publication with Jay Schaefer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that one, Ethan? Like, you've been in this industry for a long time, so you probably remember. It was of Jay, and he had, I think it was his EPU.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a little 18-footer or something. It was a little tiny house.
Yep.
It was the first one that I think he had built. And Austin saw that, and he was like, always wanted an RV when he was a kid, always wanted to do that family vacation thing. He didn't really get to have that when he was growing up. So I think it was something that he always wanted. And when he saw that picture of Jay in that tiny house, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to build one of these one day." And I'm not kidding you, Ethan. Fast forward like a year or two later, he goes in, a couple years later, he goes into the Shed Yard, after doing some work with his hands for years. And he goes in for an interview, and I'm not kidding you. They open up the doors and they were like, "Hey, come on into this interview, meet the team. What do you think about this?" and they opened these big, huge doors, and it was a tiny house. And Austin was completely floored. He was like, and I love the way he tells the story because it's so much more passionate, but he's also a little shy and humble. But I will tell you that he knew right then and there he was in the right place. And it was super important for him to be there at that time. And it was a great opportunity. And he knew right then and there he had to work with those guys. So it was a bunch of Amish guys, but the last name Miller, great guys, bunch of brothers,
Yep.
pops, really cool family. And they were building for Tumbleweed.
Okay.
So they were building for Tumbleweed Tiny House Company before Tumbleweed started building for themselves. Because when Tumbleweed first started out in the industry, they used to outsource their builds. And so Austin was working with those guys. And so he started back in like 2014, I want to say, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
And within a couple of years, he, ended up transitioning from working with the Amish guys. He did end up at Tumbleweed. He, got to run that shop floor for a while.
Yep.
Broke records. I think he did like 15 tiny houses in 1 month, leading that team at a certain point in time of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few years, of doing all of that, he ended up going his separate ways, and he started his own company. And I want to say we started 2018, 2019.
Okay.
It was hard because we were like, wow, we really want to keep building tiny houses. We want to keep loving on people. We want to really help people. Our mindset was not to keep all the information so close to our hearts and instead use it to help educate people.
Mm-hmm.
Because we started to see, in 2014, 2016, 2018, we started to see the tiny house movement started to take effect, right? Like you start to see this big run.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of misinformation out there, and I was struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided, I told Austin, I'll definitely help support your company, Tiny Building Experts. We're out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and he's been doing this for a while. He will hit 500 tiny houses that he's touched this year, so he's got a lot of experience. But I decided I was going to help him as long as we were going to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That was my goal. I mean, I wanted to help everybody with education. If you wanted to build a tiny house, I wanted you to know that you could, as a DIYer, you could do it to code. You could get your house certified.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do that even as a DIYer. And I also wanted to help small businesses that wanted to do tiny houses. I wanted to help them do things correctly. I saw in the industry, there was a point in time where the industry got a little bit saturated with a lot of builders coming in, and that's fine. But we had a lot of DIYers, a lot of builders, a lot of different folks that came into the industry, from remodelers, general contractors, you name it. Everybody has embarked upon the industry over the last, 10 years and even more so over the last couple years.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to support everybody. But I also learned quickly that when we don't do things correctly, it makes it harder on everybody trying to do it correctly.
Well, absolutely.
Because the rules were already hard as it was. We were all trying to navigate, right? We decided we were going to build an RV code, right? Because, we went to states like Colorado. I'm going to use Colorado as an example, you guys. Just because I've been working in the state for a long time, for many years, about legalizing tiny houses.
Mm-hmm.
And in Colorado, if you tried to go to the building department, Ethan, they would turn me away. If I said, hey, we're going to build a tiny house.
Right.
We want to show that it's being built to code. We want to be recognized. We want to do it legally. And it was just always a quick no.
Right.
It was just a no. It was, as soon as you were building on wheels, it was considered an RV. Not only in the state of Colorado, but many states across the United States. If you built on wheels, the local building jurisdictions called it an RV. So that's why tiny house companies went out there and got RV loans for customers and went to RV certifications.
Mm-hmm.
So Austin, for example, as well as other tiny house builders out there, those really good builders that wanted to show their houses were built to certain standards.
Yep.
We used RV code, right? NFPA 1192. Which is RV code.
Yep.
And so a lot of builders were like, okay, great. We're all meeting over 500 different codes for fire, electrical, plumbing, safety. Everybody's feeling good about it because truthfully, builders like Austin, they were really exceeding code.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at like RV code, there's nothing really in there about framing.
Right. Well, RVs don't have framing. Right.
Because they don't have trusses and girders.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And they don't have ridge beams.
Sure.
And they don't have 2x4 framing. Yeah. I think in RVs, it's like 1x3. And I could be wrong. I'm sure somebody will correct me. But I know that it's 2-inch walls in RVs and in campers versus 5-inch walls that I have in a tiny house, which is the same as your regular home, right? Like you literally have at least 5-inch walls if you're doing standard 2x4 framing.
Yep.
So the point that I bring this up is, the builders were building to exceed RV code.
Yep.
They were already doing it, Ethan. We just weren't recognized for it. Nobody just wanted to recognize us for it. And so with these new Colorado law, the new House bill, I kind of want to tie that in here. And the new law was designed to say, hey, we're now going to recognize that you guys are building these houses to code.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So that's
a big deal.
Let's talk about, so there was a lot in there. I kind of want to, I do want to talk about Colorado, but so the RV code, which has been the direction that the industry is going, there is also at the same time Appendix Q and the kind of slow and, moving along efforts to put, tiny houses on wheels into, the standard residential code. Curious what your thoughts are on those kind of two efforts. It sounds like, Austin and your company are still kind of on board with the RV code and doing it to that kind of side of things, or am I making an assumption?
Well, it's actually going to get to a point, Ethan, with if you're a good builder and you want to do the right thing and you want to take care of your customers correctly, we're actually in a situation where we're offering a dual certification because, Ethan, I have to.
Right.
The reason why, first of all, let me break apart your question here. So you talked about Appendix Q. So Appendix Q is for tiny houses on foundations.
Right.
Period. That's what Appendix Q is for. So if you already want to build a tiny house and your local jurisdiction accepts Appendix Q, because not all jurisdictions accept it. Okay, or have accepted the code.
Correct.
Okay, meaning that they're willing to allow you to build to it.
Correct.
There's nothing in Appendix Q, at least from what I've been aware of and why we've all been having issues with it, is there's nothing in there about wheels.
Right.
It was all foundation. So that's that.
Right.
So Appendix Q for me is tiny houses on foundation. We have rules for that.
Right.
It's already been established. But I think the state of Colorado, for example, was like, well, why aren't people doing it? And it was like, well, because they didn't want to build their tiny houses on foundation. They wanted them on wheels.
Right.
And so now they're doing this new rule.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert on the codes either, but my understanding is that IRC is actually working on an update to Appendix Q that will essentially add, will expand that set of laws for tiny houses on wheels. So,
okay, I have an appreciation for that.
That will be interesting when those two things are there. Yeah.
So this is what's going on. Are you ready? And I'm going to data dump it. So we've got NFPA 1192, which is RV code and RV certification. We still have ANSI 119.5, which is RV park model certification.
Right.
Okay. Then we have Appendix Q, which is that is IRC. Appendix Q was designed for tiny houses. It was to make some specific rules specific to tiny houses to be able to be recognized. But that, again, is on foundation. So now let's talk about ASTM with Janet Thome and her team. Let's talk about this new Colorado bill that now defines tiny homes on wheels.
Yeah.
You're going to throw ICC in there too, right? With FIA,
Code
right?
soup. Yeah.
Correct. So here's where I'm at. You know what I told everybody, and I've been telling everybody for the last year, and I'm not going to be popular for this, and it's okay because I focus on loving on everybody, is I really feel like all of these teams should have came together a long time ago, because now you have people like me and other builders across the United States that are keeping up with all of it.
Right.
And now, right? So great. If ICC is working on something now that says Appendix Q allows for tiny homes on wheels, well, then why didn't anybody know about this for the last many, many years that Appendix Q's been around? Because it didn't allow for wheels. So now ICC is just starting to go down that path, correct? Are you aware that this is something new that they're working on?
Right. Yeah. This is something new as far as I know.
Right. So we've got ASTM standards, right, which are just standards that they're working on, right? There's a whole new team. We're participating in that team. Now we have ICC, and I believe Thea is teamed up with ICC on that, and they're working on that, and that just started. And then we had, for the last 9 months, I've been working with the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
Because Colorado went to all of those teams and said, hey, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Because Colorado even wrote, hey, Ethan, just so you guys know, Colorado even wrote it into the law that if a new standard comes into play, that Colorado has the right to adopt that.
Nice.
Right? So they even wrote it into the law.
This is really interesting to me, and I think that this could be kind of one of the most forward-thinking state regulations that I've heard of. Can you talk me through, what is HB 1242? Like, what does it do?
Okay. So I've tried to make it really simple for everybody because it's actually, there's a lot of great, exciting things about it. There's a couple of things that, and I've said this to the state of Colorado, I think there's a couple of things that we got wrong. And I don't think anybody expected for us to get it perfect the first time. We tried. It was a lot of hard work. But I think there's a couple things that we could have maybe had gotten a little bit more cooperation from the local jurisdiction, or not even so much the local jurisdictions, is the TAC team and the state of Colorado. I will say that I was very appreciative for them in getting to work with them. I feel like they truly tried to put themselves in our shoes as tiny housers, enthusiasts, builders, homeowners, customers, right? Like, I feel like they tried to put themselves in our shoes, but it was hard to meet what the state needed, what customers needed, because this was also about consumer protection, Ethan.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we had to get to the point where we needed consumer protection, but we did have a few bad apples. There was always going to be bad apples in every bunch. Okay.
Yep.
So this was also about the state. It was about consumer protection, protecting people, right, from builders that don't do the right things. And it was also supposed to be about giving the builders a path to be able to follow and have certified legal tiny houses placed in the state for our customers. And then obviously, as somebody who owns a tiny house, it was supposed to benefit us, right? It was supposed to help people with the affordable living problem, because we all have affordable housing problems. Everybody does.
Right.
I talk to everybody in all kinds of different states, right? I'm in the tiny house movement and in the industry. I'm a tiny house consultant. So I work with lots of different builders across the United States. And we're all hearing the same things. We're all going through the same things. It's not just California that has a homeless living problem. It's Colorado too. And it's not just Colorado. Texas is starting to have it. A lot of other states are starting to have it too. So now that everybody's all listening to each other, right? Now it's time for all of us to work together. We need to work together to make this easier for all of us. And so that's kind of what I feel Colorado did is, so let's talk about the bill.
Yeah.
So this is what the bill is designed to do, Ethan. 3 focus areas. 1, as a consumer or a tiny house person that's going to live in a tiny house, you need to either buy a Colorado certified tiny house. All right.
Okay.
Or as a DIYer, you have to build it to code, and you can.
Okay.
Okay. You can follow the same process as me.
Okay.
DIYers, you guys can follow the same process as us as builders, and you can also have a Colorado state certified tiny house. Okay.
Okay.
So that's number 1.
So Colorado has set up its own certification, or do they
Correct.
recognize? They recognize, like, okay, if you're RVIA certified, then you're Colorado certified.
So that RVIA, Pacific West, as well as NOAA, are 3 certification companies that all inspect NFPA 1192 RV code or ANSI 119.5, which is RV park model code.
Yep.
So the state of Colorado has their own inspections, and their own rules that we have to follow.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
Yes. Now, they are working on allowing third-party inspectors
Mm-hmm.
to get like certified through the state or to qualify.
Mm-hmm.
So those companies can still do inspections, but I don't know if NOAA or PacWest has made it through that process yet.
Yeah.
Right now, when I submit our first tiny house to the state of Colorado, that I'm getting ready to submit plans
Okay.
for one of our first houses that will have a dual certification. It's being built to ANSI 119.5, which is RV Park Model Code,
Mm-hmm.
but we're also building it to the new Colorado state certification as well.
Nice.
Now, okay, so that's number 2 is build your house to code. Number 2 is tie it into the utilities.
Mm.
So you have to tie in your plumbing, your electrical, your septic. So if you want to go buy a piece of land and your land allows you to put a tiny house on it legally, meaning that you're not in an HOA that's telling you you have to have a minimum of 1,200 square feet, right?
Sure.
Because zoning is still in charge.
Yep.
Your land dictates what you're allowed to do with your whether you can put
Yep.
a tiny house or not. So here we go. Tie it into the utilities. So I bought a legal certified house, or I built one to Colorado specs. That was number 1. Number 2 is I'm tying it into the utilities. So if I'm allowed to park a tiny house, let's say next to your house, Ethan, on your property in
Mm-hmm.
Colorado,
Yep.
and your land allows for me to do that, I need to tie in my utilities into yours. Meaning I need to tie my septic in. I need to be able to have fresh water coming in. So I need to get a spigot out there by my tiny house,
Mm-hmm.
or some sort of way to get fresh water. And then I need to tie into the electrical. So that means the electrician needs to come out to your house and either run me a pole, is what they refer to it, or a pedestal. You'll often hear people refer to it as an electrical pedestal. Or it could even be as simply as adding a 50 amp RV hookup into your garage.
Okay.
Right? And my cord fits because I'm parked right next to your house. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to tie into the utilities correctly. That is number 2 for these new rules. Okay. So be ready to tie into the utilities, but they're going to let you park it, which is
So no living off grid.
Well, I didn't say that. So they welcome solar.
Okay.
Also, there's a lot of pieces of land, Ethan, in Colorado where you don't have well access. I can't dig a well. I will never get to. So there are places in Colorado where we have water cisterns.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have 1,000 gallon water cistern and your water gets delivered to you.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
They just want to know that you are tied into the utilities, because there's land here in Colorado where you can't get water but just delivered. Well, Rainbow Valley up in Teller County is one example. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they are aware that there is some land here in Colorado, especially in like Hartselle, and some of those rural areas where you're not going to be able to get water or you're not going to be able to get electricity. So they understand that there's going to be some off grid.
Okay.
But it still needs to be approved by your local jurisdiction. Now, notice I didn't bring up septic on that. This is the one thing I left off. I just said water.
Yes.
With a water cistern and deliveries.
Yeah.
And I said solar, that'll be your local jurisdiction. That'll give you the thumbs up on your solar, just like you do regularly anyways. Okay.
Yeah.
But the septic, you guys, they don't want number 1 and number 2 in the ground.
No compost toilets.
Right. Yeah. They're not friendly. We're not compost friendly in Colorado.
Yeah.
We're really not.
Yeah.
There's some RV parks in the state that were grandfathered many years ago, but most RV parks, even though there's some that were grandfathered, still don't let compost toilets come in.
Mm.
It's the same thing with land. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, because I'm sure somebody is going to listen to this podcast and say, wait a second, I have a compost toilet in Colorado and I'm approved.
Yeah.
I've seen some get approved, Ethan. I really have. I have a customer. She's out east. She's got a couple little tiny houses and she has compost toilets.
Mm-hmm.
The local jurisdictions, her county came out and they helped set her up for success. They basically poked her that if she had a compost box where she could show where all of her composting went and it was dedicated to going, that they would allow for her Airbnbs to use the compost toilet. So when I say no compost in Colorado, I'm saying we're not compost friendly here in Colorado, but I have seen some exceptions.
Okay.
You need to work with your local jurisdiction, but I'm going to say, and I don't really know this statistic, but I'm going to just take a guess and say 9 out of 10 times, they do not want compost.
Right.
They want you to flush.
Yep.
So that's number 2. You got to tie into the utilities. And number 3, for parking your tiny house legally in the state of Colorado with these new laws, number 3 is you have to place the tiny house legally. Well, what does that mean, Tracy? So with the state of Colorado, when you place a mobile home in a mobile home park, there is a state certified, what they refer to as an installer. So, yes. So there is a company or companies out there, and they're listed on the website, you guys. I already had to call to try to find an installer for a customer that I have going out in Durango. And so I was looking for an installer for her. And so there's a list of them on the state of Colorado's website. Out on our Facebook page, I have listed the DOLA website on our page at Tiny Building Experts. So if you need a link, go out there and look for it, you guys. I have it already posted, but there's a list of installers. So you would have to have your tiny house installed according to your local jurisdiction. What does that mean, Tracy? It means, so we put some tiny houses in downtown Colorado Springs for a community that we helped develop. Along with Shelley and the We Fortify nonprofit.
Yeah.
And the city told us how we had to place the tiny houses. So we had to have hard packed land. We had to strap the tiny houses down permanently to the ground. So we used D-rings and strapping mechanisms, and we put jacks underneath the trailers, and we stabilize it, and we kind of like strap them semi-permanent. Okay. And so the city will tell you how they want you to place it. Sometimes you're going to have to pour concrete. Sometimes you're going to have to pour an RV pad or maybe strips for where your wheels go. Have you guys ever seen where RVs were required to have like cement underneath the wheels, but yet you don't have to have it?
I have seen that.
Yeah. So that's all based off your local jurisdiction.
Okay.
If you're going to try to put a tiny house, you guys, on the side of a mountain, you're going to have to get engineered piers to be able to place that tiny house on that side of the mountain.
Makes sense.
That's what I mean by placing it legally. So wherever you're going, geographically located in the state of Colorado, whether you're on soft land, hard land, mountain land, by the river, by a lake, whatever, your local jurisdiction is going to dictate how we place your tiny house. In a lot of cases, you're either going to have to put something underneath your wheels, and you're probably going to have to strap it, which isn't hard. It's not costly to do. It doesn't get costly until you have to start pouring cement.
Right. And that is costly. Well,
that's where you're going to spend money.
You know, I kind of wrote down, you know, I'm taking notes. I'm kind of thinking about my next questions. How the tiny house industry has grown up, and how expensive this all sounds.
I know, Ethan, and I'm sorry. So you're right. It made me sad, I guess. So there's the con, right? So there's pros and cons to everything. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, I fought with every bit of my heart on that team. And I said it a million times on every one of those calls. This felt like punishment for builders that were doing it the right way, because I saw all of the costs that were adding up that I was about to have to pass on to my customer.
Right.
It felt like it didn't feel good. Okay. It felt like, okay, now I have this I have trust accounts now that I have to do to protect customers. I now have, certain rules that I have to follow. I have to submit plans, which cost money. I have to get a blower door test done now, which costs money. I had to increase your R value by an R4 in your roof because the state's making us. It's going to cost us a little bit more money. I'm going to have to move to 2x6 framing in my roof instead of 2x4. I'm not happy about it. It's going to cost my customers more money. So there are things that I don't feel we won on. But I can say that we needed to start a path for legalizing, because right now they're just not legal.
Right.
You can only live in a tiny house in an RV park right now.
If you're doing it, if you want to do it legally.
If you don't want to have somebody kick you out.
Yeah.
If you don't ever want to get the knock.
Yeah.
Or the piece of paper that gets put on your door that says you've got 2 weeks to vacate.
Yeah.
And now you have 2 weeks to find out where you're going to place that tiny house. Good luck. You're going into an RV, right?
Yeah.
So most tiny houses are in RV parks right now because we didn't have a choice.
Right.
But now this gives them a chance to place it on the land legally. Now there's some benefits to it. yes, you're right. It's going to cost a little bit more. It's probably going to cost a few $1,000s more per house.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not happy about it, but at least I know my customer isn't going to get the knock.
Right.
At least I have customers that I know will be able to put their tiny house legally now in the state of Colorado.
And that's a good thing.
So from that perspective, I know it's going to cost a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm not happy about it costing a couple $1,000s more. I don't like it either, but I do know that my customers are going to be able to buy a piece of land, live the dream, place it legally.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the best part about those people that want to put it on a piece of land and place it legally. Here's the benefit to you guys. You ready? Yes, it's going to cost a little bit more. And yes, people are like, but wait a second, now I'm going to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
If I put it on land and I tie it in, yeah, you're going to pay taxes, but you also now have a house that's appreciating like a regular house on land. And you're not paying personal property taxes anymore at a higher percent. You're now paying real property taxes, which is at a lower percent.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some benefits to it. There's some pains to this.
Yeah.
But we had to start somewhere, and we had to try to help people place a tiny house legally. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, the tiny house builders, at first, a lot of us weren't really on board. We weren't really excited about it. All we felt was a bunch of regulations. We saw the costs. We saw the things starting to add up, and we weren't really excited about this at all. So that was very hard for us as builders.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit there and say everybody welcomed this, because not everybody welcomed it. But I'm going to just tell you guys what I told everybody else. The reason why our company decided to get it on and work really hard to make it onto the TAC team with the state of Colorado to write these laws is they were going to do it with or without us.
You want to have a seat at the table.
The state of Colorado, that's what it was, Ethan, is the state of Colorado was going to write these laws with or without us. So if we didn't get involved, we weren't going to be able to fight back against those costs for our DIYers or that path for people to live legally. So don't get me wrong, we fought tooth and nail against the costs and the whole time.
Right.
And we did ask them to remember this was supposed to be about affordable living. So, we begged them through the whole process to remember this. I'll let you guys know how much it really costs as I submit my first one.
Yeah. And I saw that there are, speaking of costs, the law definitely has teeth in terms of the violations for, builders who violate the law. It looks like up to $20,000 per violation and up to $50,000 per violation if the victim is an elderly person.
Dude, so yes, these were hard, right?
Yeah.
So they did make some amendments. Just so you guys know, they did make some amendments.
Okay.
There were some things that, this was all supposed to be in the best interest of consumers.
Right.
We had to protect consumers. Getting builders to do things correctly, which is also needed in our industry. I try to help all builders, Ethan.
Yeah.
If somebody calls Austin, and trust me, we get these calls all the time.
Yeah.
And they want to ask as a competitor to him, just a fellow builder, he will take their call and he will give them an honest answer of how to do something correctly. Because we would rather coach people in our industry to do things correctly because it makes it easier on all of us. These laws wouldn't be so hard right now had everybody did things legally and correctly. And unfortunately, there were some folks that didn't do things correctly. And so now we're all suffering those consequences. So I'm not happy about all of it, Ethan, but I will say again, we didn't have a choice. It was either we get involved and we help them make it better for us, or we sit back and watch them do it without us. And so that's why we chose to fight and get involved.
How does this, and I know that you didn't write the bill. You're just being so incredibly helpful and knowledgeable about it. So anybody who's listening, this isn't Tracy's fault if you don't like it. She just, she's just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. How does this affect builders outside of the state of Colorado who might, because people are like, oh, I can work with a builder not in my state. I can work with a builder from another state. How does this affect somebody in Colorado, maybe who wants to buy a tiny house from a builder outside of Colorado?
So on our Facebook page, and I need to get it up on our website, but the resources that I posted, the state of Colorado wants you guys to go to them. Literally. They said, come to us We will help you guys. If you are, let's say you already had a tiny house and it was built, like I already got this question. I have a lady, her tiny house was built in Kentucky or Tennessee. And we know that it's not going to meet snow load, and we know it's not going to meet our value, the insulation values that you need here in Colorado. Breaker panel location. There's just a couple of things that we know are just not going to meet code. The state of Colorado is welcoming those of you guys that already have tiny houses to go to them to see if they might be able to help you rectify or fix what may be wrong. I don't know how costly it's going to be to fix framing or rip a roof off or try to get more R value. I think it's going to be costly. I do think there's going to be people selling their tiny houses.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be able to sell that tiny house to somebody that's planning on living in Colorado because they're not going to be able to park it here either. Right. So from an ethical perspective, ethics wise, I will say this. If you're a builder and you're out of Colorado, you can still build to Colorado laws and follow all the same rules that I am as a builder. So the state of Colorado is not saying, hey, builders from out of state, you can't do this. That's not what they're doing. They're saying you are welcome. If you're a builder out of Colorado, you are welcome to build to the same rules that I have to follow in the state of Colorado.
Okay.
So whether you're a DIYer, whether you're an out-of-state builder, or whether you're an in-state builder, we all have to follow the same rules. It doesn't really matter. So if you're an out-of-state builder, you could still build to our codes. You still got to pay the same fees that I do. You still got to pay the annual registration cost. You still have to pay for your trust accounts. You still need to pay for your bond. Right. I now have a yearly bond put on my company. So they just have to follow the same rules that we do.
Right. And then how does that work for a DIY builder who's just building one tiny house? Do you have to do all those things or
So that's the kind of cool things. They can still do it. They just need to submit their plans to the state of Colorado.
Okay.
They need to get it approved. They need to go through the inspection process. They'll pay for the blower door testing. They'll pay for their plans to get inspected. They'll pay for the inspections. They just won't have to do like a manufacturer like us. We're a factory built manufacturer now. So they won't have to pay that yearly fee. Right, to be a manufacturer. So there's going to be some benefits to the DIYers, some costs that'll be removed.
All right, that all makes sense. And wow, this is you're clearly so knowledgeable about this and so helpful. So I just really appreciate you walking me through it. I feel like I have my head around it, and I hope that somebody listening to this episode also kind of now has their head around it. Do you think this is going to become a template for other states? Have you heard anything?
I do. It's funny that you say that. I was talking to a young lady. I was talking to somebody that I was doing an interview with yesterday out of Denver, and she's from Utah. And she says, my state's behind. And I said, don't worry, this is going to be replicated. I'm pretty confident that a lot of other states are about to copy
Nobody likes
and paste.
To be first.
You know what I mean by that? Literally copy and paste. Look at Washington, California. Those were two states that were kind of front runners in legalizing tiny houses or creating paths for their states. Colorado's in it to win it as well, just like other states are doing it. And I feel like all that's about to happen in all of the other states is they're going to start copying and pasting our methodology.
All right. Well, congratulations to Colorado for being first.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. I will say the fact that Colorado defined a tiny house on wheels that is separate from an RV, separate from an RV park model, separate from a manufactured home, separate from a tiny house built on foundation. It was really all about the wheels, Ethan. And so kudos to Colorado for not trying to cut the wheels out.
Right.
Because if you go and you look at all of the codes and everything, it was always that the wheels were left out. Now, this is where we're at, everybody. You guys with me? Here's what I will tell you guys. Start talking to everybody you can. If you're an enthusiast, start talking about the wheels to zoning. Now we need zoning to allow for the tiny houses.
Right.
We've got the states recognizing us. The states are now saying, hey, good job on your build. You guys are building to code. We're happy. You're tying it in. You guys are doing the right things. Now we need zoning to be a little bit more friendly. So that's kind of what I encourage everybody out there right now is follow the new state laws, but now let's start encouraging zoning to help us out too.
So how do we do that? I mean, I know that zoning is not something that's Well, I guess it is legislated at the state level in some ways, but it's more often a patchwork of every single town has their own zoning laws.
So it's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that it's not, Ethan, but let me say this. 10 years ago, when Austin first started in this industry, I started about 8 years ago. I started in 2016. And nobody would even talk about it. Like zoning was just absolutely would shut you down immediately. Okay. I went to all kinds of different counties. I know. I remember getting the canned letter that says, no way. And we're not accepting Appendix Q either. So no, don't ask. Right. So I remember all of the no's for so many years. You guys, they're changing zoning. They're already doing it. Ethan, they're already starting it in other states. They're even starting it here in Colorado. Just so you guys know, for the first time, we got to participate recently here in Colorado Springs. We joined a call. It was last year, right when we were working on these new laws, and it was for zoning. And it was about the verbiage that we were going to use for tiny houses in zoning. So we are now, and I asked them to keep the wheels in the verbiage for zoning. We are now in our states. I don't know all states, but I do know there's several of them that are working on it, that are working on this new thing called flex zoning.
Okay.
Flex zoning is going to allow for more tiny houses in more areas. And so it's also going to allow for, you ready? This is the big one, you guys, communities. So here in Colorado Springs and in Colorado, we started to accept some communities, but not all communities. And so now Colorado is in the position where we have to define what we're going to allow from tiny house communities within zoning. So
awesome.
It's already being worked on. It's happening. And I'm going to tell you guys this. For the last 9 years or 8 years of my career, whatever, zoning wouldn't talk to us. But in the last year, really talking to zoning now. You guys, this is the first time ever in a decade that zoning is listening to us. They're answering our questions. Ethan, I am going to place a tiny house, I hope, in the city in Colorado Springs in a backyard in an area that's normally not zoned for tiny houses. I'm going to know in the next probably 2 months of whether we're getting that tiny house placed legally in Colorado Springs.
Nice.
Which honestly is going to be like miracle status. Okay. Because for 10 years or 8 years, it was just a flat out no.
Interesting.
So I'm saying that the new laws are helping us with zoning, but we all need to start talking about it again. So we're going to follow the new Colorado state laws. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Zoning folks, we need your guys' help too.
Nice.
And that's where we're at.
Well, Tracy, I appreciate your time so much. And this is all so exciting. Where can people find you online? It sounds like you post a lot of resources, and I'd love for people to be able to connect with you there.
Yeah. So we have a website. We don't do very well at marketing, you guys. We build beautiful tiny houses. I tell everybody all the time, we're terrible at marketing, but we're wonderful at building houses. So you can book a complimentary consultation call with us on our website. It's www.tinybuildingexperts.com. Follow us on Facebook. We're trying to get better about posting more photos. We know that a lot of you guys like the educational photos.
Yep.
Just learning how to do different parts of the builds. We have a lot of DIYers that are following us.
Nice.
And we also have a lot of new builders that follow us because we do offer consulting. So not only do we do consulting for DIYers and people that want to build their own tiny house and people that build a tiny house with us, but we also do consulting for small businesses that want to have a tiny house business, but do things correctly. And they want to get set up legally and start that process.
Nice.
So yeah, just find us out on Facebook. Again, it's Tiny Building Experts, plural with an S. And we are out in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We have a tiny house shop. I'm actually joining you guys from one of the tiny houses right now.
Nice. It looks great.
Yeah. This tiny house won the People's Tiny House Choice Awards at the People's Tiny House Festival this year.
Nice.
So that was kind of cool. But we do have a shop down here in Springs. So if you guys are ever in the area and you guys want to come and visit, you're welcome to book a visitation with us and we'll give you a tour and let you check out the tiny houses and see how we build them.
Sounds great. Tracy Manchego-Baker, thanks so much for being a guest today.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Good luck, Ethan. You're doing a great job. We appreciate you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Tracy Manchego-Baker for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes at thetinyhouse.net/276. There you will also find a complete transcript, some photos of tiny building experts' homes, and links to all of the details about the new Colorado tiny house building laws. Well, that's all for this week. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast.